Welcome to the channel. I know many of you listen to these videos to relax or fall asleep, and I'm really glad you're here. Before we start today's crime stories, please take a moment to subscribe if you haven't already. You can also leave a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. And if there's any crime story you'd like me to narrate for you, feel free to request it in the comment section. Now let's begin. Story 1. Michel Fourniret was born on April 4th, 1942, in the town of Sedan in France. His father was a metal worker. His mother was a homemaker, meaning she stayed home to care for the family. Michel grew up as an only child. He was a very quiet boy who kept to himself. Other children remembered him as intelligent. He enjoyed activities that required patience and silence, like playing chess. He also liked listening to classical music. As a teenager, Michel studied to become a priest. He entered a Catholic seminary school. He did not finish his religious studies. He left the seminary before becoming a priest. After leaving, he had to complete mandatory military service. He served in the French army for a time. When his military service ended, Michel Fourniret began to drift from one simple job to another. He did not have a career. He worked as a forestry worker, which means he worked in forests cutting trees or planting them. He also worked as a school supervisor, where he watched over children during breaks. He was not a teacher. He married a woman named Jean in 1964. They had a son together. During this time, they lived in a small house in the countryside. Michel Fourniret's first known problem with the law happened in 1966. He was 24 years old. He was arrested for sexually assaulting a young girl. The court found him guilty. He was sentenced to time in prison. This was his first prison sentence. After he was released, he returned to live with his wife and son. He tried to work different jobs again, but it was difficult. In 1984, Michel Fourniret was arrested again. This time, he was charged with sexually assaulting several girls. There were 5 victims. The court found him guilty a second time. He was sent to prison. He stayed in prison for 3 years. His marriage to Jean ended because of his crimes and imprisonment. She divorced him. While he was in prison in 1986, Michel Fourniret decided to write letters to women he did not know. He put a pen pal advertisement in a magazine for Catholic families. A woman named Monique Olivier saw this ad. She was married to another man and had children. She wrote a letter to Michel in prison. They began to write letters to each other very often. In his letters to Monique, Michel wrote about his dark thoughts. He told her about his sexual fantasies. These fantasies involved raping and murdering young female virgins. Monique Olivier did not stop writing to him when she read this. Instead, she wrote back. She said she would help him do these things if he would help her first. She wanted him to kill her husband. Michel Fourniret agreed to this plan in their letters, but he never actually killed Monique's husband. Michel Fourniret was released from prison in 1987. He was 45 years old. He immediately went to meet Monique Olivier. They began a romantic relationship. Monique left her husband and her children to be with Michel. They started living together in a small house in the region of Yonne, France. After his release from prison in 1987, Michel Fourniret moved in with Monique Olivier. Together, they began to plan crimes. Their first known crime happened later that same year. On December 11, 1987, they drove in 2 separate cars to the city of Auxerre. They had seen a 17-year-old girl named Isabelle Lavillade or 2 earlier. They decided to target her. On this day, they saw Isabelle walking home from school. Monique Olivier stopped her car near Isabelle. Monique pretended to be a lost driver. She asked Isabelle for directions to a specific street. When Isabelle agreed to help, Monique asked her to get into the car to show her the way. Isabelle got into the passenger seat. Monique then drove to a prearranged spot where Michel Fourniret was waiting. He was standing next to his own car, pretending it had broken down. Monique stopped and pretended to offer help to this stranger. Michel got into the back seat of Monique's car. Once Michel was in the car, he quickly attacked Isabelle Laville. He used a piece of rope to strangle her until she lost consciousness. Monique then gave Isabelle a sedative drug called Rohypnol to keep her quiet. They drove the unconscious girl to their home in the village of Saint-Cyr-les-Collines. Inside their house, Michel Fourniret raped Isabelle Laville. He then strangled her to death. Later that night, they drove her body to a remote area called Bussienov. They threw her body down an old, dry well. They left the scene and told no one. In early 1988, Michel Fourniret received a visit from a woman named Farida Hamish. She was the wife of a man Michel had met in prison. This man was a bank robber. Before he was arrested, he had hidden stolen gold bars and coins in a cemetery. Farida Hamish asked Michel to help her dig up this hidden treasure. Michel agreed. They went to the cemetery at night and retrieved the gold. Farida took the treasure to her apartment in Vitry-sur-Seine. She gave Michel a portion of the gold as payment for his help. Michel and Monique wanted all of the gold for themselves. On April 12, 1988, they devised a plan to kill Farida Hamish. They called her and asked to meet. They picked her up in their car. They drove her to a forest near Clairefontaine-en-Yvelines. There, Michel strangled Farida Hamish to death. They buried her body in the forest. Her body was never found. After the murder, Michel and Monique broke into Farida's apartment. They stole the rest of the gold bars and coins. They sold the gold and used the money to buy a large, old house called the Château du Sautou in the town of Donchery. By the summer of 1988, Monique was pregnant with Michel's child. On August 3rd, they drove to a supermarket parking lot in Chalon-sur-Marne. They saw a 20-year-old woman named Fabienne Leroy. Monique pretended to feel very sick. They asked Fabienne for help finding a doctor. Fabienne, wanting to be helpful, got into their car. They drove to a remote area near a military camp. There, Michel Fourniret raped Fabienne Leroy. He then shot her in the chest with a gun, killing her. They left her body in the forest. It was found the next day by other people. In March of 1989, Michel Fourniret met a 19-year-old woman named Jean-Marie Desremalt on a train. They talked. She told him she was staying at a convent in Charleville-Mézières. On March 18th, Michel and Monique met Jean-Marie at the train station. They used fake names. They invited her to their home in Floing for a visit. She accepted. At their house, Michel asked Jean-Marie if she was a virgin. She said no. This made Michel very angry. He attacked her and tried to rape her. She fought back. Monique helped Michel by holding her down. They gagged her mouth with tape. Michel then strangled Jean-Marie to death. That night, they drove her body to their new chateau in Donchery. They buried her in the garden. Michel Fourniret and Monique Olivier got married in July 1989. They had a young son. On the evening of December 20th, 1989, they drove to Belgium with their son. In a neighborhood in Namur, they saw a 12-year-old girl named Elizabeth Brichette walking. Michel approached her. He said his son was sick and asked for directions to a doctor. Elizabeth agreed to help. She got into their car. They drove her back to their house in France. There, Michel assaulted her. The next day, they took her to the chateau. Michel tried to suffocate Elizabeth with a plastic bag, but it did not work. He then strangled her to death. They buried her body in the chateau garden, near the body of Jean-Marie Desremalt. On May 16, 1990, in Auxerre, a 20-year-old British woman named Joanna Parrish was working as a teaching assistant. She had placed an advertisement to give English lessons. Michel Fourniret saw this ad and called her, pretending to want lessons for his son. He arranged to meet her. He picked her up in his van. He drove her to a secluded area, raped her, and then strangled her to death. He dumped her body in a river near the town of Monato. Her body was found the next day. On November 21st, 1990, Michel and Monique were in Riez, near Nantes. They saw a 13-year-old girl named Natasha Danais in a shopping center parking lot. She was running an errand for her mother. They asked her for directions. When she came close to their van, they forced her inside. They drove to a quiet beach area. There, Michel stabbed Natasha twice in the chest with a screwdriver. He then strangled her. They left her body on the beach. It was found 3 days later. After this, the couple moved to Belgium in the early 1990s. For several years, no known murders were linked to them. Then, on May 16, 2000, Michel Fourniret acted alone. He drove to Charleville-Mézières. He saw an 18-year-old girl named Céline Saison leaving school. He offered her a ride in his van. She accepted. He drove her to a forest in Belgium, raped her, and strangled her with a rope. He left her body in the forest. It was found 2 months later by people picking mushrooms. On May 5, 2001, Michel Fourniret drove to Sedan, his hometown. He met a 13-year-old girl named Manania Thumpong. He had given her a ride once before. This time, he invited her to his house to play with his son. She agreed and got into his van. He drove her to a forest in Palaiseau, Belgium. There, he strangled her to death. He left her body in the forest. It was found 10 months later. Animals had badly damaged the remains. The crimes were discovered because of a failed kidnapping. On June 26, 2003, in the Belgian town of Ciney, a 13-year-old girl was walking to school. A man in a white van tried to force her into his vehicle. The girl fought back, screamed, and managed to break free. She ran away and immediately reported the attack to the police. She was able to give a good description of the man and his van. Local police quickly located a van matching the description at a house in the village of Sarthe-Custine. The house belonged to Michel Fourniret and Monique Olivier. The police arrested Michel Fourniret at his home. Monique Olivier was also taken in for questioning. The girl from Ciney identified Fourniret as the man who tried to kidnap her. At first, both Fourniret and Olivier denied any other wrongdoing. They were held by Belgian authorities. For almost a year, the police could not link them to any other crimes. The case was at a standstill. The investigation moved forward because of Monique Olivier. In 2004, she decided to cooperate with the police. She made a deal with prosecutors. In exchange for a lighter sentence, she told them everything. She confessed that her husband was a serial killer. She said she had helped him in many of the murders. She gave details about the victims, the methods, and the locations of bodies. Based on her information, the police officially linked Fourniret to multiple murders across France and Belgium. After Olivier's confession, Michel Fourniret also began to talk. He confessed to killing 9 people. He gave specific details that only the killer would know. Because of these confessions, French authorities requested that Fourniret and Olivier be extradited from Belgium to France. The extradition was approved. Both were transferred to France to face murder charges. The information from Olivier and Fourniret allowed police to find the remains of some victims. On July 3, 2004, police went to the garden of the Château du Sautou in Donchery. Using the couple's directions, they dug in the garden. They found the skeletons of 2 victims, Jean-Marie Desremalt and Elizabeth Brichet. On July 11, 2006, police went to an old well in Bussienave. After a long and difficult operation, they recovered the remains of Isabelle Laville. The trial of Michel Fourniret and Monique Olivier began in Charleville-Mézières on March 27, 2008. It was a major trial that lasted 2 months. Fourniret was charged with 7 murders where physical evidence or remains had been found. In court, he was calm and detached. He showed no emotion when the details of the crimes were read. Monique Olivier testified against him, repeating her confession about her role. On May 28, 2008, the court gave its verdict. Michel Fourniret was found guilty of all 7 murders. The judge sentenced him to life in prison with no possibility of parole. This meant he would never be released. Monique Olivier was found guilty of being an accomplice to these murders. She was sentenced to life in prison, but with a minimum term of 28 years before she could ask for parole. The court also ordered the couple to pay 1.5 million euros to the families of the victims for their suffering. Neither Fourniret nor Olivier appealed the sentence. After the 2008 trial, Michel Fourniret remained in a French prison. Years later, he began to confess to more crimes. In February 2018, he told investigators he had killed 2 more women, Marie-Angélie Demise in 1988 and Joanna Parrish in 1990. He gave new details about their murders. In March 2020, he confessed to killing 9-year-old Estelle Mausen, who had disappeared in 2003. These confessions led to new investigations and legal proceedings. Because of these new confessions, Monique Olivier faced another trial. This trial began in November 2023. She was charged with complicity in the murders of Joanna Parrish, Marie-Angélie Demise, and Estelle Mausen. She was already serving her life sentence from the 2008 trial. Michel Fourniret never left prison. His health grew poor. In May 2021, he was taken from his prison to a hospital because he had serious trouble breathing. He died in the hospital on May 10, 2021, at the age of 79. The families of his victims stated that his death brought no relief, only the reminder of the pain he had caused. The story of these crimes ended with the killer dying in prison and his accomplice remaining there, while the families of the victims continued to live with their loss. Story 2. Gilles de Rais was born around the year 1405. He was born in a castle called Champtos, in a room known as the Black Tower. He was the oldest son of a nobleman named Guy de Laval Rais and a noblewoman named Marie de Craon. His family was very rich and powerful, owning many lands in regions called Brittany, Anjou, and Poitou in western France. His father died in October 1415. His mother had died at some point before this. This left Gilles and his younger brother, René, as orphans. The 2 boys were taken in and raised by their maternal grandfather, Jean de Craon. Jean de Craon became their legal guardian. This meant he was in charge of managing the large amount of property, castles, and lands that the boys had inherited from their parents. As a young boy, Gilles was raised to be a great lord. He learned the skills expected of a nobleman, like how to fight, how to ride a horse, and how to behave at court. His grandfather also arranged for his education. Gilles learned to read and write. He was taught the ways of the Catholic faith. He grew up surrounded by wealth and the expectation that he would one day be an important man. When Gilles was still a teenager, his grandfather began planning his marriage. A good marriage was very important for a noble family. It could bring more land, money, and power. Jean de Craon first tried to arrange for Gilles to marry a rich heiress named Jean Painel in 1417. However, the marriage was forbidden by a high court in Paris because the girl was too young. This plan did not work. Next, in 1418, his grandfather arranged for Gilles to become engaged to Beatrice of Rohan. She was the niece of the Duke of Brittany, a very powerful man. This engagement also fell apart for unknown reasons. Some historians think the young woman may have died. Finally, his grandfather focused on a 3rd cousin of Gilles named Catherine de Thouars. She came from another important family. There was a problem, however. Gilles and Catherine were related by blood, which was against the rules of the church. Also, her family and Gilles' family did not get along well. Despite these problems, Gilles de Rais did not wait for permission. In 1420, he took Catherine by force from her home and married her quickly in a small chapel. This was not a proper church wedding. Because the marriage was done without permission and between relatives, the church declared it invalid. They said it was incest. Gillis and Catherine were ordered to separate. After some time, and after the death of Catherine's father, the families made peace. Gillis de Rice was forgiven by the church. He paid a penalty for his actions. Then, in June 1422, he and Catherine de Thouars were married again in a big, proper ceremony with great celebration. This marriage connected Gillis to even more lands and power in the region of Poitou. Gillis de Rice and Catherine de Thouars had one child together, a daughter named Marie, born around 1433 or 1434. During these early years, Gillis's grandfather, Jean de Craon, was the real power behind him. He managed Gillis's lands and made important decisions. Gillis was known to be extravagant. He liked to spend large amounts of money on fine clothes, jewelry, and maintaining a large household of servants and soldiers. He wanted to live in a grand style, like a prince. This habit of spending would become very important later. After the death of his grandfather, Jean de Craon, in 1432, Gillis de Rice fully inherited the vast family fortune. He was now one of the richest lords in western France. However, his extravagant spending did not stop. He lived in incredible luxury. He maintained a private army of 200 soldiers. He paid for a chapel with dozens of priests and choir boys to sing for him every day. He ordered the most expensive clothes, tapestries, and jewelry. He needed a constant flow of money to support this lifestyle. To get more money, Gillis began selling off his lands and castles. He sold them quickly, often for prices much lower than they were worth. His family, including his brother René and his cousin André de Lohic, became very worried. They saw the family wealth disappearing. They complained to King Charles VII of France. In July 1435, the king placed Gillis under a legal order called an interdict. This was a serious warning. It meant Gillis was forbidden from selling or mortgaging any more of his properties. He was cut off from easy sources of cash. Frustrated by his money problems and angry at the king's order, Gillis de Rice withdrew from public life. He left the royal court and stopped his military activities. He retreated to his castles, primarily his castle at Tiffauges. Here, surrounded by a small group of loyal and ruthless servants, he became isolated. He grew obsessed with finding a new way to regain his wealth and power. He turned to the study of alchemy. Alchemy was a medieval practice that mixed science and magic. Alchemists tried to turn common metals like lead into gold. They also searched for a potion for eternal life. Gillis de Rice wanted to discover the secret of making gold. He spent huge sums of money hiring men who claimed to know about alchemy and magic. Around 1438, one of his priests, Eustache Blanchet, traveled to Italy and brought back a man named Francois Prelati. Prelati was a cleric from Tuscany who said he was a master of the occult arts. Gillis was convinced Prelati could help him. At the castle of Tiffauges, Prelati performed rituals to summon demons. He told Gillis that a demon named Baron could give them unlimited knowledge and treasure. Prelati said the demon demanded offerings. According to later confessions, Prelati told Gillis that the demon wanted parts of children as an offering. This dark demand coincided with a terrible secret that had already begun in Gillis's life. Several years earlier, around 1432 or 1433, Gillis de Rice had started to assault and murder young boys. The first crimes began in secret. Gillis de Rice had a taste for violent sexual pleasures that involved children. He used his power and wealth to hide his actions. His victims were almost always young boys, usually from poor families or peasant backgrounds. They were children who would not be powerful or important enough to cause immediate trouble if they disappeared. The method for getting victims was always similar. Gillis or one of his trusted servants would go to the nearby villages, markets, or fields. They would look for boys between the ages of about 8 and 15. They would approach a boy with an offer. The offer was often work as a page in the castle's kitchen, a stable boy, or a servant for the chapel choir. For a poor family, sending a son to work for a great lord was a good opportunity. The parents would let their child go. Sometimes, if a child was found alone, Gillis's servants would simply kidnap them by force. Two servants in particular were his main helpers in this: Etienne Correlot, who was nicknamed Poitou, and Henriette Griart. A woman named Perrine Martin, called La Meffraie, which means the Terrifier, also helped. She would sometimes lure children with promises or small gifts. Once a child was brought to the castle, he was taken to a private room or tower. Gillis de Rais was there. The child would be given food and drink, perhaps to calm him. Then Gillis would attack the boy. He would rape the child. After the assault, Gillis would kill the child. The murders were brutal. He sometimes cut the child's throat. He sometimes hanged the child briefly from a hook, then cut him down while he was still alive to kill him another way. He sometimes disemboweled the child or decapitated him with a sword. Witnesses later said he seemed to enjoy seeing the child suffer and die. After the murder, Gillis de Rais and his servants had to dispose of the body. They did this to hide all evidence. They would dismember the body. They would burn the pieces in the large fireplace in the room. They would collect the ashes and bones. Sometimes, they threw the remains into the castle's moat or into the latrines. Sometimes, they buried them in the ground floor of a tower or in the cemetery. They were careful to leave no trace. This pattern happened again and again. A child would be lured to the castles of Machecoul, Tiffauges, or Champtos. He would be assaulted, murdered, and his body destroyed. The servants Poitou and Henriette were active participants. They helped capture children, they held them down during the attacks, and they helped dispose of the bodies. They did this out of fear of their master, and because he rewarded them. For years, these crimes were a hidden secret. Poor families in the areas around Gillis's castles noticed their sons disappearing. A boy would go to the market and never return. A boy would be seen following a well-dressed stranger toward the castle and would vanish. Rumors began to spread among the peasants. They whispered that children were being taken to the castle of the Baron de Rais and were never seen again. However, Gillis de Rais was a marshal of France and a powerful lord. The poor peasant families were afraid to accuse such an important man directly. They had no proof, only missing children. Gillis de Rais's crimes were not connected to his occult experiments at first. They were separate, violent desires. But according to confessions, the two eventually mixed. He began to offer the blood, hearts, or eyes of the murdered children to the demon Baron during the rituals conducted by Francois Prelati. The alchemical experiments never produced gold. The demon never appeared with riches. But the murders continued for their own sake. The number of victims grew over the years from 1432 until 1440. The crimes were a regular part of life inside his castles. His wife, Catherine de Thouars, lived separately much of the time and seems to have known nothing about it. His young daughter, Marie, was also kept away from these horrors. The inner circle of servants, accomplices, and the Lord himself lived in a world of absolute secrecy and brutality. The crimes of Gillis de Rais might have remained hidden if not for an unrelated incident in May 1440. Gillis wanted to take back control of a castle called Saint-Étienne de Marmort, which he had previously sold. The castle was now under the control of a cleric named Jean Le Ferron, who worked for the Duke of Brittany. Gillis decided to use force. On May 15th or 16, 1440, he and a group of his armed men entered the local church during Mass. They violently seized Jean Le Ferron from the altar, which was a grave sacrilege. They then took over the castle and imprisoned Le Ferron. This act was a serious crime against both the church and the Duke of Brittany, John V. The Duke's authority was directly challenged. More importantly, It gave the Duke and the local bishop a legal reason to move against the powerful and troublesome Gilles de Rais. They could now investigate him without it seeming like an attack based only on rumors. Following this event, two parallel investigations began quietly. The first was an ecclesiastical church investigation led by the Bishop of Nantes, Jean de Malestroit. The second was a secular state investigation for the Duke of Brittany, led by the province's chief judge, Pierre de l'Hopital. Both officials had heard the growing public rumors about missing children around Gillis's castles. The violent church incident provided the perfect opportunity to look into these rumors formally. Bishop Jean de Malestroit began a private inquiry. He sent officials to the parishes near Gillis's residences, like Machecoul and Tiffauges. They interviewed people discreetly, asking about local gossip and whether children had vanished. Many poor families came forward. They told stories of their sons who had gone to the Baron's castle for work or had been approached by his servants and had never returned. Dozens of similar stories were collected. Based on this gathered testimony, the bishop concluded there was enough evidence of horrific crimes. On July 29, 1440, he issued a public letter. In it, he accused Gilles de Rais of heresy, sodomy, and the murder of many children. At the same time, the Duke's secular judge collected the same witness statements from grieving families. The legal case was building from two sides. Gilles de Rais was ordered to appear before the church court in Nantes to answer these charges. Sensing the danger, Gilles initially tried to ignore the summons. He may have believed his status would protect him. He was wrong. On September 15, 1440, on the orders of the Duke of Brittany, a captain named Jean Lab went to Gillis's castle at Machecoul. Gilles was arrested and taken as a prisoner to Nantes. His close servants, Henriette Griart and Etienne Correlot Poitou, were also arrested, as was the alchemist François Prelatai and the priest Eustache Blanchet. They were all imprisoned separately in the castle of Nantes. The trial began in October 1440. It was actually two trials happening side by side, one in the church court for crimes of heresy and sodomy, and one in the secular court for murder and the attack at Saint Etienne de Mermort. The church trial was led by Bishop Jean de Malestroit and a representative of the Inquisition, Jean Blauen. The secular trial was presided over by Judge Pierre de l'Hopital. The prosecution first presented the many witnesses. Dozens of mothers, fathers, and neighbors took the stand. One by one, they described how their children had disappeared after having contact with Gilles de Rais or his men. Their stories were consistent and heartbreaking. This established a strong pattern and probable cause. Faced with this overwhelming testimony, Gilles de Rais's accomplices began to confess. Henriette and Poitou, his personal servants, described their role in detail. They told how they lured children, brought them to their master, assisted in the assaults, and helped dispose of the bodies. They described the rooms where it happened and the methods of murder. Their confessions matched each other's and the locations the witnesses described. Confronted with the confessions of his servants and the weight of the witness accounts, Gilles de Rais first defended himself angrily. He argued that the court had no right to judge a marshal of France. He tried to claim the Duke of Brittany was his enemy. The judges dismissed his arguments. They pointed out he was in Brittany's territory and had violated its laws. Seeing his situation was hopeless, Gilles de Rais changed his strategy. On October 21, 1440, he asked to confess. He gave a detailed, shocking confession to the church court. He admitted to the murders, sodomy, and heresy. He said the crimes started after he left the royal court and gave in to his vicious desires. He estimated he had killed 140 children or more, though the exact number was impossible to verify. His confession was methodical, describing his actions without apparent emotion. He said he took pleasure in the suffering and death of his victims. The judges had planned to use torture to get the truth. Because Gilles confessed fully and voluntarily, they canceled the torture. His confessions in the secular court followed, where he also admitted to the murders. His detailed admissions, combined with the servant confessions and parent testimonies, sealed his fate. On October 25, 1440, the secular court announced its verdict. Gilles de Rais was found guilty of murder and the act of force at Saint-Étienne-de-Mer-Mort. His two servants, Henriette and Poitou, were also found guilty of murder. The sentence for all three was death by burning. The church court also found him guilty of heresy, sodomy, and invoking demons. They handed him over to the secular authorities for punishment, as the church could not carry out death sentences. The next day, October 26, 1440, Gilles de Rais and his two servants were taken to a field called the Isle de Bis in Nantes for execution. A large crowd gathered. Before his execution, Gilles made a final speech. He passionately begged the parents for forgiveness and urged the crowd to pray for him. He told his servants to die bravely and think of salvation. He asked to be executed first, which was granted. Gilles de Rais was hanged from a gallows over a pile of firewood. After he died from hanging, his body was cut down before it was fully burned by the flames. For noble women, possibly relatives, claimed his body for a Christian burial in the Carmelite church in Nantes, as he had requested. His servants, Henriette and Poitou, were then hanged and burned, their bodies completely consumed by the fire. The alchemist François Prelati and the priest Eustache Blanchet were found guilty of heresy, but were not executed. They were sentenced to life imprisonment. After the execution, the properties of Gilles de Rais were largely taken over by the Duke of Brittany or returned to his family heirs. His wife, Catherine, and his daughter, Marie, survived him. The families of the victims received no formal compensation. Justice in that time was about punishing the criminal, not compensating the poor. The trials and the shocking confessions provided a grim explanation for the many disappearances, but it offered little solace to the parents. The story of Gilles de Rais became a dark legend, a confirmed historical case of serial murder that occurred long before the modern concept existed. The once powerful Marshal of France was ultimately brought to justice not for war, but for the secret horrors he committed within the walls of his own castles. Story 3. Javed Iqbal was born in Lahore, Pakistan. He was the sixth of 8 children. His father was a businessman. The family was not poor. They lived a comfortable life in the city. Javed grew up in a large family home. As a child, he was quiet. He did not stand out much among his many brothers and sisters. He attended local schools. He was an average student. He did not get into trouble. His father expected all his sons to study and later join the family business. After finishing school, Javed went to Government Islamia College for his intermediate education. This is similar to a college preparatory program. He lived at home during this time. He did not have many close friends. He spent most of his time with his family or studying. In 1978, while he was still a student, Javed started a business. He did not want to wait to join his father's work. He used money from his family to start a steel recasting business. This business took old steel and melted it down to make new things. The business was located in an industrial part of Lahore. The business did moderately well. Because of this small success, Javed's father bought him a house. This was a villa, a large house, in the altar area of Lahore. Javed moved into this villa. He did not live there alone. He allowed several teenage boys to live with him. These boys were helpers in his business or did odd jobs for him. They were much younger than Javed. Javed's social life was small. He was not married. He did not spend time with friends from his college. His main companions were the teenage boys who lived in his villa. His family noticed he was becoming more isolated. He rarely visited them. When they asked about the boys living with him, he said they were his employees and needed a place to stay. His business began to have problems after a few years. It made less money. Javed sold the steel recasting factory. He was now a man in his 30s with no real job. He still owned the villa. He continued to let young boys live there with him. His habits were routine. He went out in the evenings and came back late. His neighbors in Alter saw him as a quiet, private man. After his business failed, Javed Iqbal spent most of his time at his villa. He felt angry and humiliated by his situation. One event made this anger much worse. In the mid-1990s, Javed was arrested by Lahore police. The arrest was for a serious crime involving a young runaway boy who was living with him. The boy accused Javed of a sexual assault. During this incident, the boy fought back. He hit Javed on the head many times with a heavy object. Javed was knocked unconscious and was badly hurt. The police kept Javed in custody for some time. No formal charges were ever filed in court for this event. However, the arrest and the beating damaged Javed's reputation. People in his community talked about it. His family was shamed. During this time, his mother became very ill. She was deeply upset by what had happened to her son and by the shame it brought. Javed's mother later died from a heart attack. Javed believed the stress of his situation caused her death. Javed blamed the police for his arrest and his mother's death. He also blamed society for looking down on him. He decided he wanted other mothers to feel the same pain his mother had felt. He made a plan. He decided he would kill 100 boys. He believed this would make 100 mothers suffer. He used his villa as the place for the crimes. He knew how to find victims. He targeted boys who were runaways or orphans. These boys lived on the streets of Lahore. Nobody would report them missing. He would approach them offering food, shelter, or small jobs. Because he had let boys live with him before, this offer did not seem strange. He would bring a boy to his villa. He would then sexually assault the boy. After that, he would kill the boy. His method for killing was strangulation. He used a metal chain for this. After the boy was dead, Javed would take a photograph of the victim. He would write the boy's name and age on a piece of paper. He kept these photographs and notes as records. Next, he needed to dispose of the body. He bought 2 large plastic vats. These are like big barrels. He filled them with a strong chemical called hydrochloric acid. This acid can dissolve flesh and bone. He would put the body of the boy into the acid. After several days, the body would be gone. Then, he would pour the liquid from the vat into the Ravi River, which flowed near the city. He did this many times over several years. He kept a careful journal. In this journal, he wrote details about each boy. He noted their names, where they were from, and how he killed them. He stored the photographs and notes in plastic bags. He also kept the chain he used for strangulation. He felt he was completing a mission. In December 1999, he killed his final victim. This was the 100th boy. After this, he decided to tell everyone what he had done. He wrote a long letter of confession. He sent this letter to 2 places. He sent one copy to the Lahore police. He sent another copy to a newspaper editor named Kawar Naeem Hashmi at a major Lahore newspaper. In the letter, he confessed to the rape and murder of 100 boys. He described his methods of strangulation and using acid. He wrote that he had left evidence in his villa for the police to find. He also wrote that he planned to drown himself in the Ravi River now that his mission was complete. After sending the letters, Javed Iqbal left his villa. The police and the newspaper editor received the letters. At first, they were not sure if the letter was real or a joke. But the details were very specific. Police officers went to Javed's villa in the Alter area. They broke inside. Inside the villa, they found the evidence Javed had written about. There were bloodstains on the walls and floors. They found 2 large vats filled with a dark, foul-smelling liquid. Human remains were found in the acid. They found a metal chain. They also found many photographs of young boys, each with a handwritten note giving a name and age. Everything was neatly organized. The police now knew the letter was true. They started a massive search for Javed Iqbal. They dragged the Ravi River with nets, looking for his body, but did not find it. They also arrested 4 teenage boys who had been living in the villa as Javed's accomplices. These boys were taken to a police station in another town called Sohawa. One of these boys died while in police custody. The police said the boy jumped from a window, but a medical report later showed signs of beating. Javed Iqbal was now the most wanted man in Pakistan. The city was in shock. Parents of missing boys began to fear the worst. For 1 month after the police found the evidence in his villa, Javed Iqbal was missing. The police search across the country did not find him. Then, on December 30th, 1999, Javed walked into the offices of the Daily Jang newspaper in Lahore. He surrendered himself to the reporters there. He told them he was the man from the confession letter. He said he came to the newspaper because he was afraid the police would kill him if he went to them directly. The newspaper staff called the police, who came and arrested Javed at the office. The police investigation now had a suspect in custody. They took Javed to a police station for questioning. They also collected all the evidence from his villa more carefully. The 2 vats of acid were taken to a lab. Forensic experts confirmed the liquid contained human remains. The photographs and named notes found at the house were used to try to identify the victims. Police showed these pictures to families who had reported missing sons. Many families identified their missing children from the photographs. This provided proof of the victims' identities. The police also had Javed's personal journal. In this journal, Javed had written details about each killing. The journal entries matched the photographs and notes. He wrote about his motive, which was to make mothers suffer as his mother had suffered. This journal became a key piece of evidence for the prosecution, which is the legal team trying to prove his guilt. The 4 teenage accomplices arrested earlier were also questioned. They told police they helped Javed by luring street boys to the villa. They said they sometimes helped with cleaning after the crimes. Their statements supported the evidence found at the scene. The death of one accomplice in police custody was investigated separately. A medical report confirmed he had been beaten before he died. This led to some police officers facing their own inquiries, but this was a separate matter from Javed's trial. Javed Iqbal was charged with the murders of 100 children. His trial began in a Lahore court. In court, the prosecution presented the evidence: the confession letter, the journal, the photographs, the chain, and the forensic reports on the acid vats. They also brought in family members of the victims, who identified their sons from the photographs. The defense lawyer argued that Javed was mentally ill. The lawyer said Javed's own confession and journal showed he was not thinking rationally. The judge listened to both sides. The court also ordered a medical examination of Javed to assess his mental state. Doctors found that Javed understood the difference between right and wrong. They said he was mentally fit to stand trial. After hearing all the evidence and arguments, the judge found Javed Iqbal guilty of all 100 murders. For his sentence, the judge decided on the death penalty. The judge stated that Javed should be executed in a specific way. He said Javed should be strangled with a chain in front of the victim's parents. Then his body should be cut into 100 pieces and dissolved in acid. This sentence was meant to mirror Javed's own crimes. However, a government official later stated that this specific punishment could not be carried out. Pakistan had agreed to international human rights rules, which forbid such methods of execution. The official said the legal death penalty would be carried out by hanging. Javed Iqbal was sent to Kot Lakhpat jail in Lahore to wait for his execution. While in jail, he shared a cell with another man. This man was Sajid Ahmed, one of his accomplices from the villa who had also been convicted. On October 9, 2001, a guard found both men dead in their cell. They were found hanging from bars in the cell, using strips torn from their bedsheets. Official reports ruled their deaths as suicide. However, autopsies were performed on both bodies. The autopsy reports showed new injuries, including bruises, on both men. These injuries suggested they had been beaten shortly before their deaths. This led to rumors that they had been attacked by other prisoners or guards, but no official charges were ever filed. Javed Iqbal's body was not claimed by any of his family members. The prison authorities buried his body in an unmarked grave. After the trial and his death, the victims' families received no compensation. There was no formal system to help them. The story of the crimes remained in the news for a long time. People were shocked by the scale of the murders and the use of acid to dispose of the bodies. The case led to some discussion about the protection of street children in Pakistani cities, but no major new laws or systems were created. The story of Javed Iqbal was fully closed by his death in prison. Story 4. Richard Trenton Chase was born on May 23, 1950, in Sacramento, California. His parents were Richard Edgar Chase and Beatrice Laureen Chase. He had one younger sister. The family was middle class and lived in a suburb. His parents were strict disciplinarians. His father often used physical punishment on Richard and his sister. Richard's parents argued with each other frequently. His mother believed her husband was unfaithful and trying to poison her. She saw a psychiatrist for these fears. By the time Richard was 10 years old, he began to show troubling behaviors. He was cruel to animals. He set fires. He also wet his bed well past the normal age. These three behaviors often appear together in children. Despite these problems, Richard had friends as a child. Many children attended his birthday parties. In his teenage years, Richard attended Mira Loma High School. He started to become a loner. He made a small group of friends who used drugs. Richard himself began using marijuana and LSD heavily. He also drank alcohol often. He was not a good student and got low grades. He did graduate from high school in 1968. His parents gave him a car as a graduation gift. Richard had difficulty with relationships. He began dating a girl, but discovered he was impotent. This meant he could not have sexual intercourse. This problem deeply upset him and hurt his self-esteem. He eventually talked to a psychiatrist about it. The psychiatrist suggested his impotence might come from deep, suppressed anger. After high school, Richard went to American River College. He got a job, but did not keep it for long. He had a poor work ethic and used drugs. He moved out of his parents' home into an apartment with 2 female roommates. His behavior there was strange. He walked around naked and locked himself in his room. His roommates soon moved out because of this. Richard could not pay the rent alone, so he moved back in with his parents. His mental state began to worsen. He worried constantly about his health. He cut out pictures of human organs from medical books and put them on his walls. He called an ambulance for himself, but the paramedics said he was not sick. They suggested he see a psychiatrist. His sister became afraid of him. His mother arranged for him to see doctors. One doctor found no physical illness, but said Richard had a major psychiatric problem. Richard went to live with his grandmother in Los Angeles for a time. He got a job driving a school bus, but was fired for not maintaining the vehicle. He stayed in bed most of the day. His grandmother heard him talking to himself. He asked himself, "Richard, are you a good boy?" and then answered, "Yes, you're a good boy." His grandmother bought him a plane ticket back to Sacramento. On December 1st, 1973, Richard went to an emergency room. He was in a panic. He shouted that his blood had stopped flowing and that his heart was not working. Doctors found nothing wrong with his body. They admitted him to the psychiatric unit. Doctors diagnosed him with paranoid schizophrenia. This is a serious mental illness where a person cannot tell what is real from what is imagined. His mother argued with the hospital staff and took him home a few days later. For a short time after this, Richard seemed better. His mother made sure he took his medication. But by late 1975, he started using drugs again. His mental health quickly got worse. He became very paranoid. He believed his body was not making enough blood. He thought his bones were moving around his skull. He shaved his head to watch this happen. He believed he needed to drink blood to survive. In early 1976, his parents helped him get his own apartment on Cannon Street. He began killing rabbits. He drank their blood and ate their raw organs. He used a blender to mix the blood with cola. He believed this would stop his heart from shrinking. His father visited to play chess, but did not question the rabbits. On April 26, 1976, Richard's father found him very sick on his apartment floor. Richard had injected rabbit blood into his own veins. He was taken to the hospital. Doctors sent him to the psychiatric unit. He told them he needed to drink blood because his body was falling apart. He was later moved to a different psychiatric hospital. There, staff found him hiding outside with blood around his mouth and dead birds. He denied killing them. With medication and treatment, Richard improved for several months. The hospital released him to his mother's care in September 1976. Doctors stressed that he must continue taking his medication. Richard moved into an apartment on Wood Avenue. His mother paid his rent and bought his groceries. At first, she made him take his medicine, but she decided the medicine just made him quiet and easy to control. Without telling the doctors, she slowly stopped giving him the medication. By January 1977, Richard was not taking any of his prescribed drugs. His old delusions returned quickly. He again believed his heart was shrinking. He believed he needed animal blood. He began killing and eating dogs. He answered ads for free dogs and took them home. His apartment became very dirty. He refused to let his parents inside. Neighbors heard loud noises from his apartment. He looked disheveled and sick when people saw him. In the summer of 1977, a legal arrangement where his parents managed his affairs ended. Richard wanted to be independent. His mother gave him over $1,000 she had saved for him. He bought a bus ticket and traveled. On August 3, 1977, police in Nevada found him naked and covered in blood near a lake. His car was full of blood and contained a cow's liver. The police arrested him, but tests showed the blood was from a cow, so they let him go. He returned to Sacramento. On December 2, 1977, Richard bought a .22 caliber pistol. He lied on the form, saying he had no history of mental illness. He got the gun on December 18th. He practiced shooting it inside his apartment. On December 27th, he fired the gun from his car at 2 different houses. He did not hit anyone. 2 days after shooting at houses, on December 29, 1977, Richard Chase committed his first murder. He was driving around in his car. He saw a man named Ambrose Griffin. Griffin was 51 years old. He was carrying groceries from his car to his house with his wife. Chase fired 2 shots from his car window. One bullet hit a tree. The other bullet hit Griffin in the chest. Griffin's wife heard the noises and saw her husband fall. She ran to help him. Griffin was taken to a hospital but died from the wound. The police were confused. There seemed to be no reason for the shooting. They thought it might have been a random, motiveless killing. For the next 2 weeks, Chase did not commit any known violent acts. On January 10, 1978, he bought more bullets for his pistol. 1 week later, on January 17th, he started 2 small fires in apartments near his own. He believed the people living there were spying on him. He hoped the fires would make them leave. On the morning of January 23rd, Chase entered a house while the owners were away. The door was unlocked. He stole some items, including a knife and a stethoscope. He also urinated and defecated on a child's bed. The owners returned home, and Chase escaped through a window. He then went back to his own apartment. He got his gun and changed his jacket. Later that same day, Chase went to a house on Tioga Way. The door was unlocked. A 22-year-old woman named Teresa Wallen was inside. She was 3 months pregnant. She was taking a bag of trash to the outside bin when Chase walked in. Chase shot her. The first bullet went through her hand and into her head. The second bullet went through her arm and into her face. She fell to the floor. Chase then walked up to her and shot her in the head from very close range. She died immediately. After she was dead, Chase dragged her body into a bedroom. He went to the kitchen and got a butcher knife. He also took an empty yogurt cup from the trash bag. He then mutilated Teresa Wallen's body. He cut her left nipple off. He stabbed her breast. He then cut her body open from her chest down to her hip. Her intestines and other organs came out. He removed some organs, including her spleen. He smeared her blood on his face and hands and licked it off his gloves. He used the yogurt cup to scoop blood from her body and drank it. He then washed his hands and face in the bathroom sink. Before he left, he put dog feces from the yard into her mouth. He left the house through the back door. Teresa's husband, David, came home from work a few hours later. He found her body and ran out of the house screaming. Neighbors called the police. The police saw the horrible scene. They found the yogurt cup and the knife. They saw the blood rings on the floor from where Chase drank. Nothing was stolen from the house. The extreme nature of this crime made the police think the killer was mentally ill. An FBI agent in Sacramento asked for help from an FBI profiler named Robert Ressler. Together, they created a profile of the killer. They said the killer was likely a white male, between 25 and 27 years old. He would be unmarried, unemployed, and a loner. He would look thin and sickly with poor hygiene. He would have a long history of mental problems and drug use. They said the killer was very disorganized and would likely kill again soon. They also believed he would keep evidence of his crimes in his home. 4 days later, on the morning of January 27th, Chase parked his car near a shopping center. He walked to a house on Marywood Drive. A 36-year-old woman named Evelyn Miroth lived there with her 6-year-old son, Jason. Her 22-month-old nephew, David Ferreira, was visiting. A friend of Evelyn's, a 52-year-old man named Daniel Meredith, was also there. Chase entered the house. The exact order of what happened next is unclear, but everyone in the house was shot dead with the .22 pistol. Daniel Meredith was shot twice in the head in the hallway. Jason Miroth was shot. Evelyn Miroth was shot in the head. The toddler, David Ferreira, was shot in his crib. Chase then moved the bodies of Evelyn and Jason into a bedroom. He took off his own clothes and Evelyn's clothes. He mutilated Evelyn's body with knives from the kitchen, similar to what he did to Teresa Wallen. He cut her open from her chest to her stomach. He engaged in sexual acts with her dead body. He stabbed her in the anus. He cut at her neck and tried to remove her eye. He drained some of her blood into a green plastic bucket. He then found a coffee cup and used it to drink her blood from the bucket. While he was doing this, a 6-year-old neighbor girl knocked on the door. She had planned to go on a trip with Jason and his mother. The knocking scared Chase. He later told police he took the baby and split. He took the body of the toddler, David Ferreira, and left. He took Daniel Meredith's car keys and wallet. He left in Meredith's station wagon with the toddler's body. He drove the car a short distance to an apartment building parking lot and left it there. He carried Ferreira's body to his own apartment, which was very close by. He then walked back and got his own car. The little girl told her mother that no one answered the door at the Miroth house. The mother saw that the family car was gone, so she thought they had left without her. She drove away. Another neighbor became worried and went to check the house. She found the back door open. She went inside and saw Daniel Meredith's body on the floor. She ran out and told people to call the police. Police arrived and found the terrible scene. They found 4 bodies: Evelyn Miroth, Jason Miroth, Daniel Meredith, and the empty crib where David Ferreira had been. They saw the massive amount of blood and the mutilation. They found the green bucket and the coffee cup. They knew immediately that this crime was connected to the murder of Teresa Wallen from 4 days earlier. They now believed they were looking for a serial killer. The police at the Mirath house quickly connected the two crimes. The mutilation of Evelyn Mirath was very similar to the mutilation of Teresa Wallen. The killer had also consumed blood at both scenes. The police found a clear, bloody handprint and shoe prints at the Mirath house. This gave them physical evidence of the killer. They also found Daniel Meredith's station wagon parked less than a mile away. The door was open and the keys were inside. This told police the killer likely lived very close to where he abandoned the car. Police officers began going door to door in the neighborhood. They showed a composite sketch of the suspect and asked if anyone had seen a disheveled young man. On January 28th, a woman named Nancy Holden contacted the police. She said she had seen Richard Chase, a former high school acquaintance, the morning Teresa Wallen was killed. He was wearing an orange jacket and looked very sick. He had blood on him and a crust around his mouth. He had asked her for a ride, but she was scared and drove away. She said he looked just like the police sketch. The police checked records and found a Richard Trenton Chase living in an apartment on Wood Avenue. His address was very close to where Meredith's station wagon was found. A check of his record showed a previous arrest for having a gun and that he had been in a psychiatric hospital. This matched the FBI profile perfectly. Police detectives went to Chase's apartment that afternoon. They knocked on his door, but he refused to open it. They pretended to leave. A few minutes later, Chase opened his door and walked out, carrying a box. Officers stopped him. A short struggle happened, and Chase was arrested. In the box he was carrying, police found blood-stained rags, a green plastic bucket, and pieces of a human brain. The police got a warrant to search his apartment and car. Inside his apartment, the walls and floors had blood stains everywhere. In the refrigerator, they found dishes containing human body parts and brain tissue. They found knives that were stolen from Teresa Wallen's kitchen. In his car trunk, they found a bloody knife and rubber boots. All of this was clear evidence linking him to the murders. At the police station, Chase was questioned. At first, he denied killing anyone, but the evidence was overwhelming. He eventually admitted to the murders. He explained that he needed blood because he believed his own blood was poisoned and turning to powder. He said he thought about it for weeks and decided to stop killing animals and start killing people for their blood. He said if a door was unlocked, it was an invitation for him to come inside. Ballistic tests proved that the gun he bought was the same gun that killed Ambrose Griffin, Teresa Wallen, and all 4 people at the Mirath house. Chase was charged with 6 counts of murder. Before his trial, psychiatrists examined Chase to see if he was mentally fit to stand trial. He told them his mother had poisoned him with dish soap. He said he committed the murders to get healthy blood. The court-appointed doctors agreed he was mentally ill, but said he understood his crimes were wrong according to the law. They said he was therefore legally sane and could stand trial. Richard Chase's trial began on January 2nd, 1979. The prosecution argued the murders were planned and deliberate. They showed how Chase bought the gun, practiced shooting, and then progressed from shooting at houses to killing a man from his car, and then to entering homes. They said he knew exactly what he was doing. The defense argued that Chase was legally insane. His lawyer said Chase's severe mental illness, his belief that he needed blood to live, drove him to kill. He said Chase could not tell right from wrong because of his delusions. In March, Chase testified at his own trial. He said he could not remember all the details. He admitted to drinking his victims' blood. He said he killed them to get their blood for his own survival. The trial lasted 4 months. The jury found Chase guilty of all 6 counts of first-degree murder. In a separate phase, the same jury then decided he was legally sane at the time of the murders. This meant he could receive the death penalty. The jury recommended the death sentence. In June 1979, the judge agreed and formally sentenced Richard Chase to death by execution in a gas chamber. He was sent to San Quentin prison. On death row, Chase continued to claim he was being poisoned. He wrote letters to the FBI saying that UFOs were communicating with him. He asked for blood to drink. Other prisoners threatened him because of the horrible nature of his crimes. On the morning of December 26, 1980, a guard found Chase dead in his cell. He had died about an hour earlier. An autopsy showed he died from an overdose of prescription antidepressant pills. He had secretly saved up many pills in his cell and took them all at once. He was 30 years old. With his death, the long and tragic case of the Vampire of Sacramento was closed.